In the early hours of February 24th, just over 2 years ago, a Ukrainian journalist in Kyiv heard the unmistakable sound of Russian missiles targeting his city, and he believed that he'd soon be lying in a pit with a Russian bullet in his head. But it didn't happen. Instead, Illia Ponomarenko woke up, went out, and began reporting in real time how Ukrainians acted, fought, and thought on a daily, hourly basis. His new book, called I Will Show You How It Was, spans the first 3 months of Moscow's invasion and his remarkable new love affair with his own country. Illia Ponomarenko, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Your new book charts the first months of Moscow's all-out invasion on Ukraine in 2022. A story, you said, about so many people doing incredible things and discovering a lot of incredible things about themselves. Like what?
War as such has a function of making people reveal who they truly are, to reveal their true selves. So many regular people, just like you and me, just like anyone you know, appear to be capable of incredible things like making a moral choice, of standing for what was right against all the odds, with little to no chance to win, with entire world burning Ukraine alive. Yet regular people, taxi drivers, radio hosts, the military people made decisions to stand up, make a moral choice, and fight. As many people are not truly believing in Ukraine. So my book is about very regular people doing heroic things when the darkest time comes.
You've often said that hope always wants another chance, but how close have you come to losing hope over these last 2 years?
I must say that the darkest period in this regard was the first day of the invasion, first hours of the invasion, because what was happening was chaos, was mayhem, was extremely dark environment in terms of internal world, giving us Ukrainians in Kyiv 42 to 72 hours. And first hours were telling us very little about the future and about the chances of this country to survive and to go on living and fighting and surviving. But at the same time, with first victories of Ukraine, such as the very sudden victory of Ukrainian forces at the Hostomel airfield, which is the airfield just outside Kyiv, which was attacked by Russians, with first Russian failures, spectacular failures, and sudden and unexpected failures, there appeared to be a beam of hope and a very sudden understanding that we can make it, we can do it. Russia is failing. So the period of the darkest hours very, very quickly shifted to hope and to, the motivation to move forward.
But your first thought was we were going to die. You said we were under no illusions as to what would happen. We would end up in a pit with a bullet in our head. How long did that thought stay with you?
I think it's 24 hours, let's call it this way. From the evening before the invasion, from the night before the invasion, through this night of anticipation, and to the first symbolic victory of Ukrainian forces in the Hostomel airfield that we have already discussed. The moment, initially, we really had no illusions about our chances, but still, as hope always tries to find a way, we were thinking about guerrilla war, a very long guerrilla war that is unwinnable for Russia in the end. So we knew that that's going to be a hard and terrible war with lots of casualties, lots of heavy consequences for this country, but at the same time, in the end, Ukraine will be free, Ukraine will overcome this. But with the first pictures of Ukrainian soldiers defeating Russian airborne drops at the Hostomel airfield, which was supposed to be a quick jump on Kyiv, there appeared to be hope and understanding that we
against all your expectations. You and your colleagues decided you were going to report this war in real time, not just the fighting, but what you and other people saw and felt. And in 5 days, you went from 10,000 followers on X to over 1 million. How do you explain that? Was it that you were holding up a mirror for people and saying, look into it, there's some good news, the soldiers are resilient, the invasion of Kyiv has been stopped in its tracks? Was it that?
I think it's more about the unique nature of the situation we were in. I mean, the full-scale World War II style war and invasion in the middle of our day and time in 2020s. That was in general the whole situation around Ukraine, and in general the whole war in Ukraine was so historically rare, black and white, so full of emotions, so full of things that touch upon the most basic and the best things about human nature, that it resonated with so many people around the world, because most people are good people no matter where they live in the world.
How volatile were people's emotions during that period?
And it was very much about emotions because, like I said, it was such a black and white situation, such a terrible feeling of a doomsday coming upon the entire nation that was innocent, that never deserved this. And we reporters, Ukrainians, and many foreigners who supported us, who felt this way, they were outrageous. They were, screaming from inside their souls on social media. So naturally, that gained a lot of attention because of the unique situation that we were in.
You saw people on the streets, you saw people in air raid shelters. You must have heard some extraordinary conversations. Was there one in particular that stuck in your mind?
I have a moment that I really remember, and I recall it almost every single day, about things like moms telling fairy tales to little kids in underground shelters as if there's no war, just laying there, young moms laying their kids down to sleep really late in the night on the floor, on the concrete floor on subway station that used to be a air bomb shelter. So telling fairy tales from old European, folklore, and making some little comfort for the children. So it's fairy tales in the middle of war for kids that did not deserve this.
You said the biggest difference between pre-war Ukraine and now is the sense of unity in the country and sense of becoming a nation that wants to be independent, that appreciates being independent. How does that manifest itself? Where do you see that?
It's about so many little things that happen in this country. It's about so many things that appear in the minds of people, such as, for instance, despite the war, despite the terrible situation that we're in, we have a spectacular outbreak of Ukrainian culture, like truly unique Ukrainian culture in the modern way. Songs, music, even the stand-up comedy. Stand-up comedy is just having a renaissance here in Ukraine, with young comedians having tours and having performances in air bomb shelters and gaining a lot of audience and collecting money for the military too. It's about the increasingly large use of Ukrainian language. For instance, many Russian speakers switched to Ukrainian language just because of the principle, just because they did not want to have anything in common with Russia, culturally and linguistically too. It's about so many things that really create the united Ukrainian nation, as people from Ukraine's east and Ukraine's west finally have a really large story in the common.
And you didn't expect any of this? You didn't expect that this would be the response to the outbreak of this all-out war?
I must say that this is exactly what I expected, because in the time of grief, in the darkest time, especially when it comes to such a resilient and very vibrant nation that Ukrainian is, people tend to find hope, to get united, to concentrate on something, on the idea of surviving. So it's a very natural thing, and in many ways it continues since the beginning of the conflict in Russia from the past decade. So the Ukraine from 2013 is super different from what Ukraine is. And I must say that I like Ukraine of today much more.
Let's talk, if we may, about the West, the extravagant promises to stay with you all the way to victory, and then the the delays, the faltering, the weapons that weren't given or were given late, the invitations that keep being sent to join the EU, NATO, but they don't have any date on them. Have you lost faith with the West along the way?
I don't think so. I don't think I lost faith.
But those delays have cost huge numbers
Yeah.
of Ukrainian lives, haven't they? The delays in getting the
Yes,
weapons to you and the
It's
ammunition.
true that it is true that the entire story of Ukraine persuading and begging the West into, changing the attitude, changing their position towards what Russia is, changing the entire political background, entire mindsets, begging it every single step with every single weapon. It's a complicated story. It's a hard story. It's a story.
But do people feel let down by that? Resentful?
It's pretty situational. Ukraine is extremely emotional. It's a very vibrant country with very lively public opinion. So 1 second you could be saying things like the way the West is betraying us, but at the same time, when something positive happens, the same person would tell you that the West is still with us. We finally made it. We persuaded us. But hand on heart, honestly speaking, given all the, as we look at the general situation, at everything that happened, even over the last 2.5 years, it's impossible not to say that the West has really changed. It's not changing as fast and as dynamically as we wanted, as it's necessary for the sound victory of Ukraine and the free world in this war. But West is changing. West has done much more than we could realistically expect, knowing what West used to be 2 years ago.
Would you trust the West any more or any less if Donald Trump becomes president again?
I think we still have hope. Even if Donald Trump becomes a president again, we still have hope. One of the things that we learned from this war is that there's always a way. If you are not giving up, if you are ready to go on, struggling, fighting, working, there's always a way to go. Because we have overcome so many nevers about so many things about in this world in order to survive.
So many times you were written off. People didn't trust you. People didn't have faith in you.
I don't think that ever happens, because it's a dynamic process of very painful, very steady evolution towards enforcing something with the West, persuading, working with the people. It's a work. But it's at the same time, it's something to work with. So that's why we're not losing hope. We're always finding a way.
You said you think that the war could go on another couple of years. What do you think would have happened by then to end it? Mutual exhaustion on both sides, running out of ammunition?
What we are thinking about, and what many analysts also note, that Russians have been fighting this war as if there is no tomorrow. I mean, their resources are large, are abundant. Their Soviet legacy is extremely abundant, but at the same time, they were fighting the war so in such a wasteful way that that they cannot compensate their losses with their own production. As many analysts noted, and we see it too from inside Ukraine, from the military too, they only cover like 20% of their losses. So in the next year, in the next 2 years, there may come the situation in which Russia will have to rely on its own production only, without any bottomless Soviet supplies anymore. So which means Russia being less capable of large-scale operations, which means Russia having to narrow down their goals on Ukraine, which means have an opportunity to strike a deal, to negotiate, because guys, you're not capable of crushing Ukraine and doing so.
And you think this will end at the negotiating table, not on the battlefield?
Hopefully that's going to be a strong position for Ukraine and for the free world to negotiate and talk. As simple, it's just a praise. Guys, you're not capable of doing this, and you're getting weaker. So let's stop this before it's too late, because you are getting weaker. But at the same time, we cannot deny that the Kremlin is not rational about this war. They are not thinking about rational positive things. They are not goodwill in this regard. So it could be an option that no matter what situation Russia appears to be in, they can go on and on and on with this war, because war as such, as an idea, the perpetual war in the West, and particularly on Ukraine, the extension of Ukraine is the like a backbone of the regime, and they're all control and rule of Russia.
So if
they
you
need,
did sign an agreement with them, would you have any expectation that they'd stick to it?
no, absolutely no. The only possible reason for them to stick to the agreement is to enforce, a sort of a peace deal on them. They will never observe a peace deal that is not enforced unless they have to, unless they are forced to do this. So there's no goodwill. There's no trust in any sort of agreement unless they absolutely have to do this, unless they are not capable and disabled and denied from their ability to go and fight in this war. This is the only, unfortunately, way.
And you don't see any possibility of ever living peacefully, permanently beside each other after this? At least for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, the only possible way to that is to disable Russia from having large-scale offensive operations against Ukraine, and which is even more important, Ukraine being way too strong and way too dangerous as a potential victim of another attack. So being way too strong is the only possible way to prevent another war and to go on living without war, and to go on preventing another war. So the day when hostilities stop will be the beginning of the period of extremely hard work from inside Ukraine and from outside Ukraine too, to prevent another war by making Ukraine as strong as it possibly can be.
Mr. Ponomarenko, you live now in Bucha, 25 kilometers west of Kyiv. The area saw a massive, brutal occupation by Russian forces in March 2022, which left hundreds dead. Many appeared to have been executed in cold blood with their hands tied. How is Bucha now? Is it one of the hopeful signs that you spoke about?
Yes, I must say that I moved to Bucha shortly after the liberation from Russia, and I bought my first apartment shortly before the beginning of the full-scale invasion. And when I returned to Bucha, following the police, following the military, as alongside with so many journalists in there, the picture was terrible. It's really hard to describe the picture of mayhem, of the smell of death and the touch of evil that was in the air following the withdrawal of Russians. And I remember many colleagues saying that after everything that was seen in there, after all the mass graves, after all the dead bodies that we saw, Bucha is cursed forever. It's going to be a cursed land. But it never happened, really. Springtime came, people returned to the city, moms got out with their babies in parks, the sun came, the life prevailed. So ever since then, Bucha is one of the best places to live in here. Many places were resurrected. A lot of people moved in there to live, So in many ways, I'm really happy that I moved to Bucha and I live here and I enjoy living here, because in many ways, what happened to Bucha is a sign of hope. It's every single day I walk through the streets and I see it. I remind myself of the fact that life always prevails. The light prevails over darkness. And this is exactly what happened to the small town, cozy town in the woods just outside Kyiv. Life prevailed no matter what.
Reporting on this conflict, you came across dead Russian soldiers. One of them you were able to identify from the name patch on his uniform in an online search. Who was he, and how did it make you feel seeing photos of the place he lived and the family, and imagining what his life might have been like had he had the chance to live it?
Yes, I indeed identified one of the Russian soldiers. To be precise, he was an officer. Young guy, 25 years old, young officer, with military education. The guy is he's an ethnic Buryat. He was born 7,000 kilometers away from Kyiv in Russian region, really close to Mongolian border. Healthy, young looking guy, big fan of football, of activities. And I really I only got the patch name, and I was able to, with the help of the internet, to reconstruct the entire life. His family, his sister, his mom is a teacher. His town is poor and destitute, so far away from Ukraine. And to me, this experience, this very random experience, I must say, was one of the pivotal moments for the entire, for my entire life and for my entire career, because I realized how absurd, that was the essence of the idiocy and the absurdity of this war. This young guy could have a family. This young guy could be like a local coach for this football team. It's so far away from Russia. He could be, I don't know, a local deputy and work on making his life and the life of his peers better, so far away from Ukraine. Yet he died for nothing. He burned in a tank for nothing, 7,000 kilometers away from home, for an idiotic war that is unjust. And moreover, which is even more terrible for me and for everybody else, is that so many good people, young guys and girls from Ukraine, had to die to stop him and the likes of him in the idiotic war for the megalomaniac dictators and his wishes. And this is one of the most tragic and terrible things about war.
2 years on, how normal does it feel to still be in the middle of this war? How much of pre-war life has survived over the last 2 years?
When it comes to most of the Ukrainian territory, like Kyiv, Lviv, many other cities, even Odessa, life is as close to being normal as it can possibly be, because there's a thing about human nature and war that people tend to be striving to normalcy as much as they can. So business working, restaurants working, shopping malls, despite power outages, by the way. People use technologies to stay online, to stay working, pay taxes, to participate in the economy, to go places, enjoy life, and go to seaside.
But is there a sense of urgency among people that they don't put things off? If they were thinking about getting married, would they go and do it rather than wait because of the war? Has it changed people's attitudes in that way, for instance?
That's an interesting thing that happens to human society in war. People do not put important and beautiful things aside in the middle of war. If you want to get married, war is the best time to do this, because who knows what happens tomorrow. Same things about, changing their human lives, doing something beautiful in this. Many of my friends, they have kids despite, having a war, because this is the attitude. So there may be no tomorrow. So today is today, life is now. So this is the and I would say that it might sound weird, but it's one of the beautiful things that happen to people in war. So people live lives and they defy the darkness. They defy the life-killing force that covers this country. And at the same time, it's a sort of a defiance towards what Russia wants to achieve, is to go on living as Ukrainians. Enjoying Ukrainian culture and Ukrainian language, enjoying Ukrainian life, trying to make this country still a better place, and defy the death and go on living is one of the ways to combat this war.
It sounds almost as if in the middle of all this conflict, you've fallen in love with your country again and again.
Yes, I must say that again, it's a very interesting thing about human psychology, is that when you are about to lose something, you start really appreciating something. And it works on a personal level. For instance, my love to Kyiv. Okay, I always loved Kyiv, for instance. The city gave me so much about in my life. But at the same time, when you're about to lose it, you start really appreciating. So I dedicate my days when I'm not off work to studying history of Kyiv, to walking the streets and knowing every single detail about this ancient and beautiful city, and with an extremely vast civilizational significance. Same goes about Ukraine, to history of Ukraine, and it works on the society too, because people rediscover Ukraine for themselves. Many people start appreciating what they have, and the people in general, over the decade of this war, people started seeing the beauty that they have of having an independent country, of proud country, of country of their own, that is about them. So it really works this way. We love Ukraine as much as never before on so many personal levels.
Illia Ponomarenko, it's been very good to have you on Conflict Zone. Thank you very much
you.
indeed.